All right, opening statements will begin next week in the murder trial for a man accused of pushing his wife off a cliff. Toni Henthorne fell to her death in September of 2012 during a scenic hike in the Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park. Her husband, Harold, told police it was an accident, but investigators say he couldn't explain why he had a park map with a big X marking the spot where Toni fell. Federal prosecutors say he murdered her to collect millions in life insurance money, and she was not his first spouse to die under unusual circumstances. Criminal defense attorney Whitney Boan and trial attorney Chip Merlin join me now to talk about this. Thank you both. Whitney, let's go ahead and just kick off with you. Is this tough to prove? It's a cliff, big empty area, no witnesses. Will this be difficult for prosecutors?
I believe it'll be very difficult. I believe that this case is solely based upon circumstantial evidence. You've got no witnesses. You've got a coroner who initially said that this was an accidental death and then later changed the cause of death after the prosecutors, I guess, decided that they wanted to go forward with this. You have somebody who was married to someone with a large life insurance policy. That in and of itself does not make him guilty of murder. This could just as easily have been an accident as it could have been that he pushed her off of a cliff. And the problem is, whether he's guilty of it or not, the government has the burden of proving the case, and they have to prove that through actual evidence. And I think they're going to have an uphill battle with this. I really do.
Chip, what do you think? Prosecutors say that he changed his stories a couple times, that he didn't accurately say exactly the same thing when he talked about her actually falling off that cliff, that he had gone several times to the area, that he had scouted it out. Your thoughts?
Well, it is a circumstantial case, but it's motive and, in this case, opportunity. And in this particular case, it comes down to a lot of credibility. It's the misstatements about the text messages, what he said he was doing, why he was doing these things, and the text messages don't add up. And then, now that the judge has said, we get to talk about the prior death. Oh, yeah, the wife that had the $500,000 insurance policy and why they just happened to be fixing the flat tire. The car goes off the jack and she dies. It shows he knows he's going to get insurance money in the event there's an accidental death. And it's not the type of case where there's a forensic examination. A person who falls off a mountain is the same way if somebody gets pushed or if they accidentally fall. The question really, I think in this case, has come down to credibility. And right now, it looks like he has a lot of witnesses lining up against his credibility.
Yeah, let's touch on the first wife. Her name was Sandra. She died in May of 1995 after the couple had pulled off to the side of the road. They were allegedly changing a tire that wasn't completely flat, was a little low, and the Jeep Cherokee fell on her and crushed her. Whitney, will this have an impact that jurors may know about this prior wife also dying under unusual circumstances?
I mean, I agree with Chip. I think this is largely going to come down to the strength of the witnesses that the government has to be able to try to show that, you know, this is someone who was, you know, always intent on murdering these women, and that, you know, he was solely seeking to gain money, and that was his motive, and that's where he was coming from. It's not going to help. From a defense attorney's perspective, I will say, you know, them having a very circumstantial case, but then adding in that evidence where they're now going to be arguing, hey, you know, he did this before, he knew it would work. As Chip said, you know, I think that this may strengthen their case to some extent. I don't know that I think that this means that it's a done deal. I still think that he might possibly be found not guilty. I think that there's a lot of questions that will be unanswered. Right. And what we need to keep in mind is he doesn't have an obligation to explain himself. He doesn't have an obligation
All right. We
to
shall
prove
see
that
what
he didn't
happens.
do
That
this.
trial set to get underway next week. Whitney Boan, Chip Merlin, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.